Welcome, friends. James Corbett here, CorbettReport.com, continuing to cover the fallout from the U.S. decision to withdraw from the JCPOA, better known as the Iran nuclear deal, and the reimposition of sanctions on that country. You will have seen, I hope by now, some of my recent coverage of that. For example, my recent podcast episode, my interview on financial survival, my recent newsletter. But, of course, now the Trumpsters who have swallowed the QAnon PSYOP wholesale and believe that, of course, the president is playing 67-dimensional pinochle and is 18 steps ahead of the game, so anything that he does is good by default. Or, as I say, they're coming out of the woodwork to say, well, obviously, if he's withdrawing from this deal, it must mean because Iran really is working on nuclear weapons, and this is part of draining the swamp or something, blah, blah, blah. For those in the reality-based community who are interested in the real fallout from this deal, however, that is pretty much encapsulated in this headline from Press TV, the Iranian news outlet, which I'm surprised to note you can still access freely online. Perhaps that part of the online crackdown isn't quite here yet, but I'm sure it's coming in the next few years. But anyway, for the time being, you can go to presstv.com and read that CNPC is set to replace Total in Iran gas project. For those not in the know, CNPC is the Chinese national petroleum company. Total is Total SA, the French oil and gas giant, and the Iran gas project relates to the South Pars natural gas field, by far the largest natural gas field in the world, still largely undeveloped, but that is changing. And here it says China's state-owned CNPC is set to take over a leading role held by Total in a huge gas project in Iran in case the French energy giant decides to quit amid U.S. sanctions against the Islamic Republic. The possibility of Total's pullout is quite high now, and in that scenario, CNPC will be ready to take it over fully, Reuters quoted a senior state oil official with knowledge of the contract as saying. So, for those who don't really grasp the significance of this at first glance, this is huge. As I say, the South Pars gas field is far and away the largest natural gas field in the world, and is still largely undeveloped. It is in the process of being developed. China has already sunk $20 million into just planning to develop the field, and they have a 30% stake in the field. Iranian national oil company Petropars has 19.9%, and Total has 50.1%, or they did, until the U.S. reimposed sanctions. And if Europe goes along with those sanctions, that means bye-bye that 50.1% stake to Total, and too bad. And CNPC is just going to take it over, and the Chinese are going to develop the South Pars field pretty much by themselves, and giving a little cut to Iran, obviously. So there you go. So that's a pretty significant thing. And this is, of course, all part of the fallout from this reimposition of sanctions. That is, if Europe goes along with the sanctions and just rolls over and says, yes, sir, to Uncle Sam, who cares about our economic interests? We're just going to do whatever you say. So that, of course, is the still lingering question mark over this. But at any rate, China is set, is ready, is chomping at the bit, resource hungry and reserve rich as it is, to jump in and fill that void. They're certainly happy to do it. So for the people who want to know more about this and what's happening right now, I did write about this in the most recent newsletter. The fate of the world is in the EU's hands, God help us all, because obviously I'm not taking sides here. I'm not saying yay EU or yay Iran or yay US. I mean, it has nothing to do with that. It's just an analysis of what is happening, and it really is a question of whether or not the EU is going to go along with these sanctions and what that means in either event. I mean, either the EU goes along with the sanctions and China jumps in to fill that void and gets strengthened geopolitically and economically as a result, or the EU has some backbone on this issue, does not go along with the sanctions, and Total continues along with this project, as well as some of the other Airbus and others that already have deals with Iran, will continue along with their economic development of that country, and basically stick a big middle finger to Uncle Sam and move closer to the Eurasian side of the geopolitical chessboard. And so either way, the U.S. is losing influence and power and political capital over this withdrawal, this unilateral, we're going to pull out despite the fact that there's absolutely no reason to pull out version of events. It's just basically a big shooting themselves in the foot, which, of course, is perfectly predictable. This is the perfectly predictable result of all of this. And that's why I think this is part of the engineered downfall of the West. We are moving towards the Eurasian 21st century, and this is part of it. And, of course, Of course, that's the other part of this. God help us all. As in, this isn't something we necessarily want. Oh, yay, someone's sticking up against the American Empire and against Uncle Sam. No, that's not really the way to read this, because, of course, as you'll know, if you're a longtime listener to the Corbett Report, episode 297, a seminal episode of my podcast, China and the New World Order, they're just another part of this false Hegelian dialectic that's being presented. Phony opposition, the truth about the BRICS, the great decoupling, how the West is engineering its own downfall. I've been talking about this for years and years. All of these moves that are basically Uncle Sam shooting himself in the foot. Oh, would you look at that? It looks like China's going to benefit from us pulling out of this Iran deal. Who would have thunk it? Well, of course, the real engineers and the people who really know what's going on really do know how this is going to play out, and they really do want it. They want the rise of this multipolar world, the Cold War of the 21st century to take over from the phony Cold War of the 20th century. Again, more on that in all of the things that I've written and talked about so far, and more that I will talk about in the future. But to get up to date on the latest of these U.S. sanctions and what it means, the fate of the world is in the EU's hands. Please read that editorial and consider that in light of this recent news. I think some huge things are afoot, and the people who are just going along with God Emperor Trump and his 67-dimensional pinochle are not going to understand what is happening. You will understand if you are following CorbettReport.com, so please do so. Looking forward to talking to you again in the near future.